Hi, we're here today with Josephine Humphreys in the Stacks, the Georgetown County Library System, and she's been so gracious to join us. Josephine is the author of 4 novels. She's won awards and fellowships and prizes, too numerous to mention here, but she is a member of the Fellowship of Southern Writers and also a member, an inductee of the Academy, the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and she's a great person as well as a great writer, and one of the absolute shining lights of South Carolina literature, as well as what I think we might call Lowcountry literature. So Joe, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. This was a good audience and good library.
Had a great crowd and a very engaged crowd, and they loved hearing your stories. I've heard you several times before, but this time you really you had some personal tales to tell. So really,
those get easier to tell as you get older.
Okay.
I don't have as much vested in the past as I used to.
That's an interesting transformation. Yeah, you can be more open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a native Charlestonian.
Yes. I was born there in a hospital that closed right after I was born. So I'm kind of the last one in Riverside Infirmary.
Okay. And what was it like growing up in Charleston?
Gosh, Charleston was a different place in the 40s and 50s. I mean, completely different. And it was fun. It was an adventure. I had 2 sisters. We had a great deal of freedom to roam. At an early age, we went all over town by ourselves. I can remember riding a tricycle 2 blocks to the grocery store. So I was about 5 or 4
Wow.
then. And I belonged to a gang of girls that made the city our playground. It was really, really wonderful.
Yeah, that's something. It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
And you record a lot of those changes in your work as well.
There aren't even a lot of children living in downtown Charleston anymore because it's too expensive for young families. But I had tons of friends, and as a teenager I was in a group of girls allied with a group of boys, about 10 people in each group. And we swapped boyfriends back and forth for several years. But it was our own little community, a club almost.
Yeah. And how would you say that your relationship with Charleston has fueled you or inspired you as a writer?
Well, it's beautiful, for one thing. You can't get past that, and sometimes it's too beautiful. We have always been close to the land, whether it's the country, the creeks, the woods, or the beach, and the old city. I mean, there was just such a wealth of beauty for kids to feel like they were part of. And I feel really lucky to have been able to know all that. But also there's history. And I have to say that when I was a child, I was not at all interested in history. In fact, hated it in school, and I think it was because there was so much Civil War history. That was all. Mm-hmm. That's what you mean when you talk about Charleston history. You're talking about Civil War or plantation era, and that didn't interest me. And so now I think there's a lot more Charleston history available. Charleston was really important in the Revolution. So, and not just wars either, but it's interesting. I started a history group on Facebook about 5 years ago, Charleston History Group, and it now has 24,000 members. And people are so interested and contribute to it all the time.
Yeah, you bring that up, but you're a novelist and a great one, but you also you've done other forms, magazine work. You have a great piece, I think it was in the Smithsonian, about their Civil War. It seemed like the Civil War had come back to Charleston in a piece that you were writing. You were in your writing office in downtown Charleston.
That's right, and here comes the Army down the street. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's being reenacted and what's just being enacted. That was a reenactment that, for a number of seconds, I wasn't sure what it was. I thought it could be something real.
Here it comes again.
Yeah.
You're living and breathing in that Civil War history in present Charleston. So that's a great piece.
There's something else about Charleston that I should have mentioned today. I knew this, but I didn't really put it into words until my husband did. But Charleston was full of crazy people, eccentrics, characters. And of course, characters are good for a fiction writer. And we knew these people. They lived among us. They were the town's personalities in a way.
Yeah.
And a lot of old ladies, obviously, but also other interesting people. And when my husband and I moved back here, I was interested in seeing what he thought of Charleston. He grew up in Chicago, and he loved the town. And one of the reasons he liked it was that he said, Charleston makes room for its eccentrics and accepts them. I think that's a wonderful quality for a town to have. I'm not sure it still has it, but it did.
Yeah. And that's a part of it too, and something that there's a conversation that you record in another piece of writing between. It's sort of it's a memory of in honor of Pat Conroy, where you talk about a conversation you had at a party with him. And you talk about, he said, how can you make it as a writer in Charleston? It's a tough racket and a tough place to be a writer, and you respond sort of in those terms.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I said. You remember better than I do, but Charleston, you can be a writer in Charleston because it does accept its crazy people, and writers are all crazy. And he said, well, it's okay to be a crazy woman as long as you're a brave crazy woman.
Yes.
And most crazy people are brave anyway. So.
Yeah.
But I remember also one time, my kids, there was some kind of PTA event at their school, and I didn't want to go. And they said, why don't you want to go? And I said, well, because I don't have any parent clothing. I had jeans and a black sweater. And they said, what difference does that make? You're a writer.
Yeah.
And so I realized that not only does being a writer give me a little leeway, but it also helped to explain to my kids why I'm crazy. So that's good.
Yes.
Good. It worked out well.
Get some writer's license there.
Yeah.
So that's, and Charleston, at least when you were coming up, that gave you a little, it gave you some cushion there.
Yeah.
And it gave you fodder for your material, for your writing, which is not based on that Civil War past that Charleston's so steeped in. You write about contemporary Charleston and the changing over, the development of Charleston, or Mount Pleasant at least, how it's changing over, and lots of other
I've thought
things.
about that for a long time because my dad was director of the Charleston Development Board, which tried to lure industry into Charleston County, the Tri-County area. And my mom worked for the Charleston Museum, which took care of all the relics and antiques of the past. So I grew up with the past and the present, at the breakfast table. And I didn't think of them as competing, but as two aspects that we needed to pay attention to. Right before my dad died, I asked him, we were driving across the Cooper River Bridge, and I said, did you ever imagine that there'd be this much prosperity and development and jobs and money in Charleston? He said, I had no idea. And he wasn't happy about it. I thought he would be.
Yeah.
But he, for the first, when it happened, he saw the downside of overdevelopment.
Yeah, it's definitely changed the nature of the place somewhat, and some of that's good, some of that's, as you record in your novels, it comes with some strain and some pressure, and on the landscape certainly, and on the animals.
And on the people.
And the people as well, so it's... and interestingly, when you did write a Civil War-based novel.
Not in Charleston.
But
right?
in Joe Humphreys' fashion, it's not in Charleston. You take off from your native terrain and you move it up to Robeson County, and it's based on Lumbee Indian history.
Which was, for me and for a lot of people, a sort of secret history.
Yes.
It certainly wasn't well known by the general population, even the, historian and educated population. But that was the book I wanted to write when I decided to be a writer. And for me, it is the most important one because the story is one that was really in my heart, and the other stories were in my heart too, but this was just a big one for me.
Nowhere Else on Earth is the name of that one. Won the Southern Book Award.
Yeah.
It's a great novel. Love story, war story, and
kind of a
outlaw.
Bonnie and Clyde story.
Yeah, outlaw story. Great, just a great, wonderful read. But you talked a lot about your family history, which was fascinating today, and about you described your history, your own family growing up. Your childhood was just weird enough in Charleston to give you enough material to write, and talked about your grandmother, and she sounded like a very interesting person to know.
She was, and we lived with her for a while. She had a house on Church Street, at the bend in Church Street, which is a historic, beautiful place. Yeah. She had it as a result of a divorce settlement. Yeah. She was a divorcee, and to me, tragic figure, really. There was nothing I could do to change her past, to make it all okay. But in a sense, my mother was the same. But having them, and having them always there to encourage me and to say, oh, this is a wonderful story that you wrote. Oh, I love this poem that you wrote. It helps me to remember that when people ask me, what can you do to encourage a young writer? And what you can do is to tell them they're really good at it, whether they are or not. It has a huge effect for somebody to say, you are good at this. And it's not hard to say. It's something that pays off immensely.
And that generosity is, humility and generosity are not that common of traits, in terms of
writers.
In writers, especially towards other writers. So that's a rare quality, but I think much appreciated. So that is part of why I think
it's funny,
writers love you.
There is a lot of competition among writers,
Yes.
and it almost can't be helped. One very famous writer told me one time that every time she picks up a new book by somebody else, she, especially if it's a woman writer, she flips to the biography little bio section to see how old that person is and compare it to herself and how many books have been written in that time.
Right.
And she can't help it. I mean, she's a very generous, open, wonderful person, but she does that. And at the same time, though there's this sort of built-in competition, there's also an amazing camaraderie and a connection that, if you meet somebody who's a writer, you just know so much about them already, and I feel anyway, a link to them that doesn't even require much knowledge about the person himself or herself. I just know that person is thinking about a lot of the same things that I am. And, in the South, it's been interesting over time to see, in my lifetime, the public interest in books has grown. When I grew up in Charleston, there was one little bookstore. It was a great one, but there was just one. And then there were more and more.
Yeah.
And I noticed one time that you could go into a Southern bookstore and tell the clerk, or ask the clerk, have you got any new work by Pat? And they know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you can say, anything new by Lee? Anything? We knew the writers by their first names. I think that's sort of true even now.
Okay.
But there was in the 80s, I guess, there was an emergence of a group of Southern writers like I had not seen before. So, and I have gotten to know people that I dearly love. Admire their work, admire the person even more.
And writing tends to be such a lonely
Lonesome.
art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that you really
need those people.
That kind of
Absolutely. Yeah.
collaboration, I guess, after the fact.
Yeah.
And publishing, you mentioned, it's a cold profession out there, on that side of things. So it's a tough haul. So you have to be maybe a little crazy, crazy person, crazy woman, but you do have to be brave to be a writer, and a Charleston writer. But you've done it, and done it wonderfully. You did. You said, and it sounded like sort of an offhanded comment, but you said you need to be a Southerner. You were talking about to be a writer. I guess you need to be a Southerner.
Yeah,
what did
obviously.
you mean by that? Obviously, you're being hyperbolic.
That you need to be a storyteller. And I put it that way because I've been thinking about it so much. I remember in high school at some point learning that there was a Southern thing called the oral tradition, and it took me a while to figure out what that meant. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not part of that. I don't have aunts and uncles sitting around on the back porch telling jokes, telling stories. But that's not really all that it is. It is that we use stories as a way to communicate, not just in, outdoor grilling and storytelling or telling jokes or memories. But we actually tell stories in order to communicate with other people, and I think we do it more than people, maybe more than people in other areas of the country do. I don't know, because I've never lived anywhere except New Haven, Durham, and Austin. Limited knowledge. But anyway, let's not say we do it more. We story tell a lot.
Yes.
And we love it, and I think that is a good thing for a writer to have that habit.
And you mentioned that, and this was in relation to working with Ruthie Bolton on Gal, that it's not
necessarily literary, right?
Word-wise,
right.
Just the talkiness.
That's why it's the oral tradition.
Yeah, the oral tradition. You already said that it's just.
I suppose the oral tradition stems from an area, a region that is not particularly literate, and is a substitute, or maybe even the original, and that writing is a substitute for the oral tradition.
Yeah.
But we have both, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it's filled in nicely, the writing side, but it does, much of the best writing seems to have that strong oral background to it.
Yeah.
But storytelling is a big part of that. So, and you talked about your mother a bit and that, the family history, and told a couple of great little stories about your inheritance there. And so your inheritance, your sisters got some things, but when your mother was about to cross over.
This was how enigmatic my mother was. She was brilliant, but she had somehow gotten off the track when she was a young woman. But she was injured by her parents' divorce, and so I never did fully understand her. And she would do things that I didn't understand then and never will. But before she died, she wrote 3 little notes. She said, to my sister Marge, my sister, to my daughter Margaret, I leave my diamond engagement ring, and to my daughter Catherine, I leave my crescent pin, and to my daughter Josephine, I leave my pearls. But she didn't have any pearls, and she knew she didn't have any. So I don't know, was it a joke? Was it meant to just make me laugh, or was it really something more serious than that? And I don't know. To me, it's very funny. And she could be very funny. She was witty. She loved books. She also loved drama, the stage, and she won twice in a row the Piggly Wiggly contest to predict the Oscar winners, where you say, which movies are going to win, which actors are going to win. And she hadn't ever seen any of the movies.
Wow.
But she read about them, she saw them on TV,
Yeah.
she knew what the Oscar judges would like.
Yeah.
She was a definite recluse in the last half of her life. She lived to be 90.
Oh.
But sometimes I can see myself being classed as a recluse. Most always home. I have, a few really good friends. I have my sisters. I have a great husband and a great dog. And my kids are the best of all, but they don't live near.
Mm-hmm.
They both live in New England now.
Okay. Which didn't suit with you when you were younger. You talked about you went to Yale for a brief period, and that you had kind of a Quentin Compson response to Yale, and you got out of there too cold, and you took Wimsatt is a famous literary scholar that you took your Jacobean drama class, but thankfully got out of there. And
walked out because it was snowing
and
in September, the beginning of
September.
And I suddenly saw that snow falling in the courtyard, and I just thought, it's impossible for me to do this anymore.
And you made a phone call, and you had an exit
I
strategy.
had an ex-boyfriend in Austin, where he was in law school, and we had stayed close, and so I called him. I said, it's snowing here. What's it like there? And he said, it's beautiful. It's 88 degrees. We're sitting around outside playing guitar, smoking a little marijuana. And I invited him to marry me. I said, will you marry me? And I was not joking. And he wasn't joking either. He said, yes. And so we got married immediately. And I'm sure my mom thought I was pregnant. She'd never seen a wedding happen so fast. But I was ready to get out of there. And it was the right thing to do. I mean, I loved Texas, and I still do. It's just an amazing place. And Texas genes.
Right.
It comes to me scientifically.
Yeah.
So Texas, South Carolina are both my favorite places.
Yeah. So that's, and your grandmother was from Texas,
Yep.
and so you talked about that,
And my husband's family from
your
Texas.
husband's family, and so that's Tom, and
Yeah.
that became a long-lasting union.
It did. It did.
And you left behind literary studies and went into literature, and we're all much richer for it, and rich in love as well, we could say. But so that was a wonderful change there. Yeah. So you took that change in career path, married Tom, and you talked about your sons. You grew up in a family of two girls, two sisters.
Girls, two sisters, and
Three girls.
So I didn't really know boys very well, but having sons was miraculous to me. I have never loved being anything as much as I loved being a mother. And when I started writing, they were young, and I made a rule that I never broke, and that was I never wrote when they were in the house. Wow. I wrote only while they were in school. So that meant I didn't write during the summertime or at night.
Wow.
And it worked well. I just split my life down the middle and enabled me to do both things well. I hope I did them well. And they... I was going to say they were interested in my work, but I don't think they really were. It was just like, since I had always done it, they didn't seem abnormal to them,
Yeah.
And I think that's one reason, although they're both really good writers, they didn't become writers. And I speculated it was because, Mom did it. If Dad had done it,
Yeah.
they might have emulated him more quickly, more easily. And my younger child was... Let's see, 1984. My younger child was, I think, 11 when he read my first book.
Wow.
And he hated it. And he said, "This is a really depressing story, and I never want to read anything else you write." I said, "Okay."
Everybody's a critic. Wow.
But then, 2 years later, he read Rich in Love, my second book, which has a teenage girl as the main character.
Oh, yeah.
And he just brought it back to me and he said, "Lucille is my kind of girl."
Nice, yes.
So I knew I had done okay.
You'd won him over.
Right.
Yeah.
And they both really are very good writers and wonderful people. Good-hearted, generous, fair, amazing. And neither one of their parents are good-hearted, generous, and fair. So I don't know where that came from.
No, that's high praise. Considering the source, I would say that's very high praise with you and Tom. So they turned out very well.
They
you're
certainly
saying,
did.
And, that's encouraging. So but the work-life balance and writing and parenting, that's amazing. And you mentioned Facebook. You're a master at the Facebook forum. I mean, you have all these followers.
I'm generally sitting there all day with a computer, and I like to work at writing for about 4 hours, no more than that, or it just goes bad. I can write really badly a lot of the time, and I have to be careful to not continue. Like if it's not going well, I shouldn't keep going and wait for a new mood or a new weather, so whatever affects you that way. And I don't like Twitter or Instagram or blogging or even I don't like email, but Facebook was different for me. Started because of pictures of grandchildren.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it was more like, well, this is a fun way to it was like a notebook for me, and
Yes.
still is. So there's stupid stuff in there, you know. There's some cat videos, but I use it in serious ways too.
Yeah, and so you have pictures of your poodle Archie has
Archie,
become kind of
dog,
a celebrity, but also when you were dealing, you were the caretaker for your father, who was going through Alzheimer's.
He came to live with us shortly after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was. Well, let's see. He was diagnosed when he was 90, and he came to live with us when he was about 94, I guess. I don't think he had, well, he did not have the kind of Alzheimer's that I've seen in other people or on TV and movies, because every now and then, like maybe once a week or twice a week, he was completely lucid, completely normal.
Yeah.
And then the next day he would be in another universe, and you know, you couldn't communicate with him. He didn't seem like himself at all. But on those clear days, and actually on some of the bad days, I got to know him better than I ever had, and I got to like him even more.
Yeah.
And he was extremely funny most of the time.
Yeah,
So clever and always joking.
The posts were they were wonderful, and I know they were helpful to other people.
Well, they were certainly helpful to me because I like remembering those moments instead of some of the horrible ones, and there were horrible ones.
Yes.
It's a terrible, terrible, frightening disease.
Yeah.
But he did it well. If he had to get through it, he held up, and I know it was sort of the thing he had always feared the most, as it would be for all of us, right? To lose your brain power and your memory.
Yeah, your identity, really, and it's
But
very
you know,
difficult.
he grew during that time, because he had been, like I said, he had been someone who was promoting the South as a place for industry, so he was definitely anti-union. He was against labor unions strongly. And one night, his hospice aide was there with him. I was asleep. She was there all night long, and she told me the next morning he stayed up all night talking, and that some of it was so amazing that she wrote it down, and she gave it to me. And he said, her name was Ellie, and he told her, he said, you know, when you're sick like this in your old age, you have a lot of time to think things over, and I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I think now that every man and every woman, Ellie, has a right to a living wage, and therefore I'm a union man. When I read that, I just laughed out loud, because, you know, like, he would never have said that before this disease took over. Never. Yeah. He would never have thought that. But what he said was true. It gave him time to think.
Yeah.
And on the days when he could think, he did.
Yeah. Well, it was an amazing, it became kind of a narrative, you know, for those of us who were watching and following.
He was there for 6 or 7 years, and so there was a lot of conversation there.
It really was like it's a novel. That's you know, and there, one of the audience members today said your grandmother's story, the kind of the terrible, tragic story of her divorce. That's a novel.
Yeah,
we're giving you a lot of homework, to do, but.
It's good. But that's
great.
why it's good to do this thing. And next time I say I don't want to do something, please call me up and remind me that, I get a lot of ideas. And if I hadn't met Louise at that book talk I ever did, I might not have been able to finish that novel.
Yeah.
Because it takes some encouragement from other people, but also, stimulus from other people to say, oh, that's a good story. You know, that helps a lot.
They're good stories on all levels. They're important stories. They matter, and the way that you're able to inhabit, a 19th century, Civil War era, characters like Rhoda Strong,
Yeah.
and a 17-year-old girl in the 1980s.
Yeah.
You know, you have that an uncanny ability to be able to kind of transfer into other lives, and I think that's a talent that's an uncommon talent. So you got to keep unburying that talent and sharing it, and that's what.
Well, thank you.
You did it today, and it was wonderful.
Well, I've enjoyed this, really have.
And
I knew I would. I told you I would. But it's a happy moment when I'm finished and I see that I didn't do anything bad.
you did everything great, and we just love getting you out and getting you in front of people to do this. And we know you're going to be coming back to Hobcaw, so
Yes.
we'll be ready for that, and hopefully sometimes in between, or we'll come down to see you in the Charleston area.
Yeah.
In between time.
Well, you saw us. Remember the little house down there?
Absolutely,
You know,
on
we
Southern.
lost it. Went away in a hurricane.
No, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Oh, God.
It didn't go completely away. It was a little gazebo house that was actually built for the set of the movie Rich in Love.
Yeah.
And but I think it was Irma or one of those hurricanes a couple of years ago. The water came up so high and with such force that it picked that thing up and twisted it off of its foundations. And so it was still there, but it was just cattywampus. And we had somebody come look at it, and he said, it can't be saved. So we had to tear it down. And that was very sad, because it was a cute thing, but it was also a souvenir from the movie Rich in Love.
Yeah.
But come back down and we'll roast hot dogs without the
Yes,
gazebo.
and some Scuppernong wine, too, so they make their own. But, well, thank you so much, and
Thank you, Daniel.
keep it going. We love you, and you got it. Yeah, we love all that you do, and you're really a great treasure for South Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you.